In a bedroom, sat down behind a table, a girl is hiding. A repeated tapping is heard coming from the window inside the room. If you were to look through said window from the outside, the girl will be completely hidden. What is at the window? Her thoughts, written out in little boxes, inform us that she has run out of food and has been hiding in this room for a week. But I can't set even 1 foot outside. The moment I do, they would get me. A voice comes from the window. Kazuko, open the window already. Aren't you hungry? If you don't come out and eat, you'll die. The girl thinks to herself, no way I'm falling for that. If I leave, death is guaranteed. The voice at the window continues to beg and tap. Kazuko knows something that, as of right now, we don't. Who is the voice at the window attached to? Clearly, it must be someone that Kazuko knows, but who exactly? How wretched. That's my voice, pitch for pitch. My voice is calling me from outside the second-story window. I'm not hallucinating, that thing is using my voice. Kazuko completely erases any possibility of the voice being attached to another human. This thing is mimicking her voice and can clearly fly as her window is on the 2nd floor. Oh, and most people usually don't refer to another person as that thing. It may sound like me, but it definitely isn't me. I don't know what it really is. All I know is that that thing is after my life. It's always there, waiting right outside the window. Kazuko has seen this thing, but it still confuses her. This thing is stalking her just like a lion stalks its prey. It's going to wait outside and use her voice to gradually push Kazuko closer to her breaking point, causing her to open the window and succumb to the creature outside.
Why does it have to be like this? It all started about a month ago. Terumi Fujino's death was the catalyst.
Hello dear viewers. This is the introduction to Junji Ito's short story Hanging Blimp. Now for those of you who don't know, Junji Ito is a horror mangaka most known for his works Uzumaki, Gyo and Tomie. He has created some of the most horrifying illustrations and stories of the last few decades. He's also someone I greatly admire, like a lot, and have been dying to talk about him on this channel. Now, I first read this story 3 years ago from this book called Shiver. It is one of the many compilations of Junji Ito's short stories. Now, he does have a vast catalogue of short stories, but I picked this one right here because it's never left my mind, honestly. And I think it's one of the most scary stories I think I've ever read. Her death was traumatic. Terumi Fujino was discovered hanging dead outside of her condo, a steel noose around her neck. It was ruled out as suicide, that the stress of being an idol weighed too heavy on her. The entire country is overcome with grief, but not as much as Kazuko. For Terumi Fujino was Kazuko's best friend. While walking home from Terumi's funeral, Kazuko and her friends discuss the suddenness of their friend's passing. They are confused as to why she killed herself. Something doesn't add up. They run into Shirashi, Terumi's boyfriend, being harassed by a mob of angry fans, claiming that he had caused her suicide because he was opposed to her music career. Kazuko gets rid of them. Her friends tell Shirashi to ignore the mob. No, they may be right. My nagging drove her to this. He begins to cry. Over the next few days, there had been an extreme amount of what the news called copycat suicides by young people. Groups of fans had gone missing. 2 boys claimed to have seen Terumi's head floating in the sky. They believe it to be the ghost of Terumi. A mass hysteria had happened after a group of fans spotted the same floating head. A professor is asked for his opinion on the matter. He claims that the people had been mentally unstable due to grief and hallucinated the floating head. A photograph is released. There it is. Terumi's head suspended in the sky. Is it a hoax or is this real? If so, how? Kazuko says, there was no mistaking Terumi's head floating in the night sky, but her expression spoke of things only the dead could know. her neck torn into a grotesque zigzag. It gave you the feeling that it had been torn off the body. Kazuko talks to Shirashi the next day in school and asks him about his opinion on the whole floating head ghost situation. I just might. I've seen it with my own eyes. It keeps coming back to my backyard, just staring at me with those hollow eyes. I think those eyes are calling me. Those siren eyes mean to pull me in. But I've stood strong so far. Kazuko, being a normal person, doesn't believe him and claims that he's tired and has attached himself to this narrative as a coping mechanism. This angers him. Whatever. Come see it for yourself if you're going to be like that. Later that night, she receives a phone call from Shirashi.
I'm calling from the payphone in front of Esho Temple. Can you come? Terumi's shown up. She's moving, slowly north. You can see her if you come now.
Kazuko sneaks out. There's no one at the payphone. She looks up. It's real. It's all real. Actually seeing her belied my expectations of what a ghost should feel like. It had a sense of realness, like I could touch it if only I reached up. Shirashi is seen climbing a tree and calling out to the floating head. Forgive me, Terumi. Don't look at me like that. There's a noose in front of him. He's not going to, is he? The noose wraps around his neck. His body swings. He's dead. The tree he is hanging from begins to shake. A gigantic head emerges from the tree. Shirashi hanging from the wire noose attached to its neck, and the face was his own. The scene playing out before me was monstrous beyond words. Shirashi's body danced like a marionette beneath the heads and their passionate lips. Kazuko runs to the police. Obviously no one believes her story. I mean, who would? The next day, Kazuko is walking with her friends. They don't know what to make of the tale that Kazuko has just told them. They stop and look at 4 dots in the sky far off in the distance. They get closer. So close that they could make out that there was a rope hanging from each of them. They get even closer. They share Kazuko and her friends' faces. Kazuko and one other friend duck. The other 2 friends are hung. They hide in an alley. Kazuko's friend's floating head snaps its noose straight after her like an octopus's tentacle. At this point in the story, you're probably thinking to yourself, since these floating heads are like balloons, couldn't you just pop them? Well, Junji's got that figured out.
Balloon go pop?
A man pops out of his window and shoots Kazuko's friend's floating head with a crossbow. Success! It begins to deflate. Kazuko turns to her friend. Her face isn't even human anymore. All that remains is a shriveled husk. Kazuko somehow ends up outside her house. Waiting outside is her mother's, father's and brother's floating heads. She makes a dash for the door as her head approaches. Kazuko and her family sit down and watch the news. The rest of the country is experiencing the same phenomenon. The news anchor warns everyone to stay inside, a swarm of flying heads outside the window behind him. He also warns everyone to not damage their floating heads, as they will suffer the same fate as their flying copycat. Well, to put it bluntly, everyone's looking a little fucked right now. All they can do is just stay inside. After such a horrifying news report, surely nobody would go outside. Kazuko's dad decides to head to work. Everyone tries to stop him, but it's pointless. Cockily, he says, "See you all around 6. Have the bath ready." He's snatched by his floating head immediately after he steps outside. Kazuko's brother decides that he must venture outside the house to find food or the whole family will starve. He has a plan though. He will use an umbrella to fill his noose. His plan works, and he runs off. A week later, countless hanging balloons drift across the sky. The corpses increase day by day. My brother didn't come back. Maybe he was home, maybe he's alive, somewhere. 3 days prior, my mum fell victim to motherly love. Now, it's just me. We have now caught up to where the story started. Kazuko is hiding next to her desk, away from her window. Her floating head somehow being able to speak is terrorizing her. Until... Hey! Sis! Sis, you there? It's Kazuko's brother. You there, sis? Let me in. I brought food. Hurry up before it comes back. I've managed to shake it off for now. Kazuko opens the window. Her brother's corpse lies hanging from his floating head, his body broken and fused with the umbrella he used earlier. Thanks for letting me in, sis. And that's the end of our story. The idea of this story came from a dream Junji Ito had when he was a child. In this dream, he was hung by a wire connected to a clay figure of a woman's torso. Now, in an early draft of the story, he wanted it to open with a dead body hanging from a balloon passing through a village, sort of as an ominous harbinger. This was later changed to the hostile floating heads. This is Yukiko Okada, a Japanese singer and actress who was active in the mid-80s. On April 8, 1986, Okada was found with a slashed wrist in her gas-filled Tokyo apartment, crouching in a closet and crying. She was discovered by a rescue team called in by her apartment manager after other residents noticed the smell of gas. Her manager eventually arrived and brought her to the hospital. Later on, Tokio Fukuda picked up Okada from the hospital. When he met her, she was weeping. He then asked her where she wanted to go, to her parents' house in Nagoya, her apartment, or the office. She replied that the office was good, so she was brought to the 6th floor of the Sun Music building. Okada was left alone while Fukuda, the management director, and the staff were discussing how to avoid a media scandal. Okada ran to the stairs, went to the roof of the 7th-story building, took off her shoes and jumped, resulting in instant death. She was only 18. Immediately after she had died, pictures were taken of her body by a reporter who was investigating the rumours of her previous attempt at suicide. TV cameras filmed the on-site investigation, the removal and the cleaning of the scene. Her fans were shocked and shattered by her untimely death, which resulted in many copycat suicides. The media found out about this and absolutely ran with it, christening the situation with neologism Yukiko syndrome or Yuko syndrome. The media spread this story all across the country, leading it to reach all the wrong people. By April 26, 1986, 23 out of the 36 youth suicides since Okada died were committed by jumping off of a building. Aiko Kanazawa, a youth affairs counsellor working out of the Prime Minister's office, was interviewed. He said Yukiko Okada's death was a clear influence in these added deaths. He's quoted saying, "Some of the people who died killed themselves because they felt sorry for her and wanted to be in heaven with her." A Dr. Hiroshi Inamura was also interviewed about the syndrome. He felt that a romanticized view of suicide due to the idea of honorable suicides, seppuku, and the concept of reincarnation helped younger people see suicide as an option in life. Now let's look back at Hanging Blimp. The death of a popular idol causes young people to take part in copycat suicides. The media reports on the issue, therefore spreading it. The situation gets much worse. A doctor is interviewed about this situation. The media could be seen as the main antagonistic force in the story as opposed to the floating heads. The media's role in the story is established as early on as the 4th page, where Kazuko is seen watching a journalist reporting from the scene of Terumi's suicide. She promptly turns off the TV. Later on, another reporter gives an audience to the two boys claiming to have seen Terumi's ghost, which is later followed up by a talk show, which I omitted from the earlier section of the video, where the hosts are seen debating over whether or not the picture of Terumi's floating head was real or fake, one host stating how spooky it is. In the world of the story, this is a real death they are making a show of. They have absolutely no shame. Both of these situations contribute to directly involving the rest of the country in trash gossip that's taking advantage of a poor situation, even if it winds up being true. The doctor that's interviewed on television in the story attempts to quell the masses by claiming that all sightings of Terumi's head were hallucinations caused by grief, which turns out to be complete misinformation. The media's role in Hanging Blimp seems to be an exaggeration of the media's treatment of Yukiko Okada's suicide. Countless times in the story, the floating heads are brushed off by the media, doctors, and even the police. They only acknowledge it when it's too late. Granted, the suicides that came after Yukiko's death weren't ignored. They were just added to the list of deaths to do with Yukiko syndrome. I think it's pretty obvious this far into the video, but I feel that the floating heads represent an intense emotion, be that stress, anxiety, loneliness, or depression. If you let it hover around long enough, it will eventually become hostile and may lead to some people taking their own life. The lack of discussion about mental health by the general public is sort of represented in the story by the man with the crossbow. The man burst Kazuko's friend's floating head with an arrow without thinking, causing it to expel all of its gas, leaving the girl a deflated corpse. This man believed that there was an easy way to fix the girl's problems, and in doing so, ended up killing her. Issues regarding mental health are never easy to solve. It just doesn't work like that. You can never just do one thing and then everything will be cured or changed. It takes a lot of time and patience. The character of Shirashi kills himself over the towering grief of his girlfriend's passing, which was then multiplied tenfold by the harassment from Terumi's fans convincing him that he had caused her death. This could be interpreted as a result of continuous harassment by a select group of individuals on the internet, a crazed fan base pushing the victim to suicide. Kazuko's dad, a salaryman, effectively works himself to death when he decides that his work is more important than his own safety. Our main character, after a week of isolation and hunger, eventually kills herself. In the years 2020 and 2021, the number of suicides for each of the years in Japan was around 21,000. This story came out in 2001, and there had probably already been many stories about social isolation related suicides before then, but I think those 2 years in particular were brutal for people. A lot of people were stuck in their houses completely alone, no contact from the outside world, apart from when they had to go shopping. Just think of what that does to people. Being trapped in one confined space for a prolonged amount of time is going to drive anyone insane. Junji Ito accomplishes telling this story in only 60 pages. Yes, he has created shorter stories, but none as terrifying and as topical as this. This will not be the last time we talk about Junji Ito on this channel.